Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kira and today we're kicking off what might become a little series on my channel where I'm going to be exploring the coloring styles of some of my favorite coloring book artists. I've done so many Rita Berman tutorials in the past trying to capture her amazing coloring style, and that got me thinking, why don't I try and do that with other coloring book artists as well? So today I'm going to attempt to color like the amazing SARA SZEWCZYK. Hopefully I'm not totally butchering that pronunciation. And she is the author of the adorable coloring book Spooky. Now, SARA doesn't really share colored pages on her social media or anything like that. She more shares her original artwork, which is inspired by her own cat, and I think that's just so cute. But I wanted to try and take elements from her original artwork and see if I could apply it to her own coloring book pages. That said, I want to clarify that this series/video isn't about trying to recreate an artist's work. It's more about learning from their techniques, analyzing their approach, and blending those influences with our own unique coloring style. So today I'm taking inspiration from these two original artworks by SARA SZEWCZYK and going to apply them to this particular coloring page in her Spooky coloring book. From what I've seen, SARA generally uses a mix of acrylic paint and acrylic markers in her artwork, and I'm going to take a similar approach by using my brand new sets of acrylic markers that Ohuhu recently sent me. This is the first set, and can I just say, this case is absolutely adorable and such high quality. But what really makes this set unique is that while there are 24 colors, you actually get 48 markers. Each color comes with both a fine tip and a medium tip option, and just wow. I was seriously impressed with the opacity of these markers. I think they might just become my new go-to for covering line work in my pages. Like most acrylic markers, you activate them by giving them a good shake and popping the tip on a piece of paper to release the paint from the barrel. The only thing to keep in mind is that the medium tip markers do take a little longer to dry just because they dispense so much ink. But that's also what makes them so opaque on black paper. The second set I received from Ohuhu is a set of brush acrylic markers. These require zero activation, and like most brush markers, they're not as opaque as acrylic markers that require activation. But what I love about a brush tip marker is the versatility. You can use the tip of the brush for fine details or the side for filling in larger areas. I probably wouldn't recommend using these on black paper since the opacity isn't quite as strong, but they're perfect for creating subtle highlights, which you'll see me do later in this video. Now, Ohuhu was kind enough to create a discount code for me to share with you guys. So if you want to receive 10% off any product on the Ohuhu website, all you have to do is use the code ARTPURPOSE10 and that'll score you a cheeky little discount. As per usual, I've talked your ear off long enough already. Let's get into coloring. So my game plan is to tackle the background first and completely cover the line work, except for Delilah the cat. I want the freedom to create an entirely new background in SARA's acrylic art style, which kind of reminds me of Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. I'm using the white medium tip marker here because it has the best opacity out of the 3 marker types. That said, even though the coverage is pretty gosh darn good, I'll still need 2 layers to fully conceal the original line work. Once that's done, I'll sketch out some guidelines. I'm following a similar approach to SARA by incorporating a variety of stars enclosed within circular shapes, creating a subtle glowing effect in a simplistic, cartoony kind of way. I'm also adding rough guidelines for the swirls of color. SARA's backgrounds tend to have loose, wavy shapes, but I want my colors to flow in a more swirly, whirlpool-like pattern, so that's what I'm sketching out here. Next, I'm using a technique that I picked up in my recent art hacks video to lighten the sketch lines on my page. I'm going to be lifting as much graphite as possible with a kneaded eraser, leaving only faint outlines so that no pencil marks are visible underneath the lighter acrylic marker colors. Initially, I tried dabbing the page, but I quickly realized it was also lifting some of the acrylic markers, so I had to switch to a sideways motion with the kneaded eraser to prevent that from happening. Now we can finally add some color to the page. I'll be using a mix of the brush acrylic markers as well as the fine tip markers, purely based on color, no other reason. I'll show you the color combos I'm using for the stars on the bottom half of the page and then finish the others off camera. And yes, I already managed to pick the wrong pink marker. Clearly my eyeballs weren't working properly, but the great thing about acrylic markers is that I can just color right over it with another shade. It might end up looking slightly different from the other pink stars on the page, but not enough to be super noticeable. Now it's time for what I consider the most intimidating part of coloring this page, which is creating the large blocks of color that I'll eventually put the line embellishments on top of. In Sarah's artwork, she achieves this effect by creating big, smooth blends of color with acrylic paint. I'm going to attempt the same look, but using the Ohuhu medium tip markers as well as a damp paintbrush. And let me forewarn you, my painting skills with a brush, they're not great. My plan is to roughly block in each color with the acrylic markers and then blend them together using the wet brush. I've never done this on such a large scale, but I did say I wanted to do more challenges on the channel, so this is certainly a challenge. While you watch me figure this out, I actually want to take a moment to answer two questions I frequently get asked about backgrounds in adult coloring. The first question is, how do you choose a color palette for a background? There are obviously tons of ways to go about this, but I'll share a few simple approaches that work well. I'll also answer this with the assumption that you've already colored the foreground of the page as well. So if you really want the foreground illustration to pop against the background, go for a complementary color scheme. Basically colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. For example, if your foreground is filled with a lot of purples and pinks, a background with greens and yellows will create the most striking contrast and make the main illustration stand out even more. On the other hand, if you want a more subtle, blended look, an analogous color scheme works great. These are colors that sit next to each other on the color wheel. So if your foreground is primarily blue, you could create a background with purples and greens for a softer, more cohesive effect. Another approach I love is using the same color palette as the foreground, but just adjusting the tones. You can either deepen the colors for a more richer, dramatic effect, or lighten them to create a soft pastel look. This method helps tie the whole page together beautifully and gives a really harmonious feel to the final piece. The second question I get asked a lot is, should you do the background first or last? Honestly, this comes down to personal preference and the medium you're using for the background. For me personally, unless I have no idea what I want the background to look like, I usually prefer to do the background first. That's because I often work with mediums I'm slightly less confident with, like soft pastels, watercolors, or Neocolor 2s. Starting with the background makes it easier to blend in any small mistakes that I might make when I color the foreground later. However, if I'm using something more controlled, like watercolor pencils or standard colored pencils, I'm totally fine leaving the background till last. Those mediums are much easier to handle and I feel more confident using them after the foreground is already complete. I really enjoyed this technique of blending the acrylic marker on the page with a paintbrush, as it gave the same effect as if I was just, using acrylic paint from a tube, but with way less waste. And a lot less cleanup for me as well. It was also a smart choice to use the medium tip markers for this technique because their slower drying time really gave me the freedom to take my time to blend the colors together. Now it's time to add all the line details, and I really think these embellishments is what makes Sarah's artwork so recognizable. I decided to stick with the medium tip markers for this part because I wanted a strong, opaque finish with thicker line work. My main plan here is to choose 3 markers for each section of color and just go to town with as many lines as I can. I want the lines to follow the direction of the swirls, but also curve around each circular star motif. I'm sure you'll get the idea as you watch me color. And look, I'll admit, as I started adding the lines, I began to doubt whether the page would actually turn out well. I wasn't sure if I should keep going or just scrap the video entirely. But then I remembered watching a video by ADC Art Attack where he took on the 1 color challenge and totally failed. He actually quit about 3/4 of the way through, and I found that super refreshing. You don't often see that side of things on social media. Usually it's just the polished successes. Seeing an experienced artist not succeed made me feel a lot more reassured. As I start doing more coloring challenge videos, I really want to make sure I upload the video no matter what the outcome is. I want to show that it's completely normal to fail the first time you try something new. Failing is actually a great thing because you learn and evolve so much more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. Plus, I have to remind myself that I'm comparing my work to someone who's way more experienced than I am. It's like comparing my chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 50. So even if this page doesn't turn out exactly how I imagined, it's definitely not a waste of time and hopefully not a waste of your time either. This challenge really is proving to be a great learning experience and is pushing me to think differently and try new things. I'm not going to grow and improve if I just stay within my comfort zone, and yeah, that's exactly the point of me making this video. Once I'd finished all the colourful line embellishments, I decided to go for a simple black hilly ground at the bottom so that the sky could really pop on the page. I also noticed that in Sarah's original artwork, there were these little white dots scattered across the entire background, so I thought I'd add some of those to my page too, using the white fine point marker. So here's how the background is looking so far. At the beginning of this challenge, I was considering coloring the entire page with acrylic markers, including Delilah in the foreground, but the pencil colorist in me is craving some shading and dimension, so this kitty cat is getting colored in my classic colored pencil style. But before diving in with my pencils, I want to do a base layer with alcohol markers. I want the pink star near Delilah to glow against her fur, and using alcohol markers as a base will make things a whole lot easier when I go in with my colored pencils. I'm also using 2 shades of grey here for some subtle highlights on the cat's fur, as if the starry night sky is reflecting off her just a tiny bit. If you saw my recent alcohol marker video, you'll know I'm working on creating more contrast in my coloring pages right now. I just really love how a page with a whole heap of dimension looks. So as I shade the elements on this page, you'll notice that I'll add a tiny bit of black pencil to the shadows at the very end to deepen them. I'll also use the fine point and brush acrylic markers later on to accentuate the highlights and boost the contrast even more. And as we draw close to the finish line for this page, I do want to quickly give you my overall thoughts on the Ohuhu acrylic markers because honestly, I loved working with them. The standout feature for me was the opacity of the fine and medium tip marker set. It's so hard to find good opaque acrylic markers, and I think Ohuhu really nailed it with this one. I'd love for them to expand the color range one day though, as having some pastel shades for highlights would be an absolute game changer. Nevertheless, I also really enjoyed using the brush markers to add some flicks of fur texture on Delilah, which you'll see me doing shortly, but if I had to pick a favorite, I think the 48 set is going to become a new holy grail in my coloring toolkit. Alright, I'm going to leave you to enjoy the rest of me coloring this page in peace, and I'll be back to tell you my thoughts on the completed page. So there it is, everyone, my completed coloring page inspired by the incredible art of SARA SZEWCZYK'. I don't absolutely love it, but I don't hate it either. Usually when a page doesn't turn out the way I want, I'll say things in my mind like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, why did I choose this, I wish I'd done that differently, but I'm trying to change my mindset at the moment. So instead of wishing I'd done something differently, I want to ask myself, what did I learn from this and what can I improve on next time? So let's chat exactly about that. Through taking on this coloring challenge, I've really realized that I just love a dimensional background in my completed pages. And I think that's what's stopping me from fully loving the page. If I were to try this background again in the future, I think what I'd do is maybe try creating a vignette effect around the corners of the background, or maybe even add some shadows behind the stars. I think that could really help improve how I feel about the page. But on the other hand, I'm really glad I tried the technique of blending acrylic markers on the page with a damp paintbrush. It was just a lot of fun to experiment with and got me out of my comfort zone and improved my painting skills just a tiny bit. Taking inspiration from Sarah's artistic style just really pushed me to think differently and also helped me solidify what I prefer in my coloring pages. If you made it to this part of the video, definitely let me know if you think I should turn this into a little series on my channel, and also let me know who you think I should take inspiration from next. I was thinking Christine Karen would be a great artist to explore and is very much outside my comfort zone yet again. Don't forget to use my discount code ARTPURPOSE10 if you want 10% off any product on the Ohuhu website. And I'm also going to link all of Sarah's information down below, her website, her social medias. I know she's having a tough time at the moment with companies stealing her artwork, so please show her some love and support if you can. But until next time, happy coloring, friends. Have a good day, have a good life, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!